Good afternoon, gentlemen. What we're going to do today is we're going to look at using the beginners kits. That is beginners kit 1 and beginners kit 2, and how they work with the FCU. Specifically, how to install modules the correct way into the FCU, and then how to teach events to modules to get other modules to do stuff. And then when we've done that, we'll have a look at installing some firmware onto the CAN-V servo module that comes in Beginner's Kit 2. That will be universal firmware, and we're going to have a look at how you can get the universal firmware to do the same thing as the original firmware. So anyway, here goes. So the first thing we need is we'll put that up. Right, so this is FCU 1.6. Okay, the first thing you will see when you open the FCU is this little box here. This little box determines what configuration you want to use. It's capable of saving loads of configurations. As you can see, the top one I've got is beginner's kits. So if I click OK, it'll bring up the configuration, and it will also ask me if I want to use COM5, which is the particular port that we are running on at the moment, connected to the CAN USB 4. So I'll select yes. Okay, you will see in the window got a selection of nodes at the top. The first one and the default one is always the CAN software node. Now, if you're using JMRI, that is where JMRI will go unless you create an additional software node for JMRI on its own. Then you've got the CAN out and the CAN imp, which are the two modules that came with Beginner's Kit 1. Just a quick going over the FCU as to what does what and where. The bottom window shows events that are in the particular nodes themselves. So we've got highlighted in the top window CAN software, and I've already created an event, short event number 100, call it servo feedback. I'll show you how to do that in a second. You then got the CAN out, which has got nothing in it at the minute, and the CAN imp that has got its default 8 channels because it's an input module. You can order these by number, by node number, clicking there, or you can order them by CAN ID, or you can order them by name. Okay, node type, or by node name. Okay, I prefer to use node number. Two little boxes over here on the right hand side. One is messages that the FCU sees, one is messages that the FCU sends out. Anyway, what we're going to do first is we're going to introduce a third node, and it's the CAN Neo servo mode. Do this by press and hold the button on the module until the green LED goes out. When you release the button, this box will appear. By default, it will tell you what sort of firmware is in the module. It will not tell you what the module is. You will see that it says Cameo Servware, SVO. That appears when it is running Cameo SVO firmware. That can apply to both the Cameo or to the CAN-V, or any of the CAN-V boards, if you build them or set them up in that way. It will then give it the next available node number, which in this case is 258. You can, if you want to, change that, but it cannot be one that already exists. You then have got to enter a name. So just call it Cameo SVO. Press OK. And you'll see over the side here that it said request node parameters and send node number. So that's the first message coming from the module. The FCU then sent request node parameters, to which the module responds parameters are, and then a string of numbers. And then the FCU responds saying send node number 258, and the module acknowledges the fact that you've told it that it's now node number 258. It now appears in the table over here. Now, if we highlight that, you will see on this side that there's nothing in the processor ID and no node variables. So you can either use the top menu and go node, read properties and read node values, or you can right click on the highlighted node, go read properties, and you'll see a string of events sent and received by the FCU, which equates to all this information that appears here. Okay, first one, they're all listed, and they are just set by the manufacturer of the firmware. Okay, and then you must do read node values as well. So those are the first steps that you must do for any given module. If you don't do those, your module will not work correctly when you come to use it. This is specifically more important when we get onto the universal. There are also other options when you right click here, one of which is read events, write events, edit output names, and edit node name. Edit node name, that's easy, that edits the node name. Output names is when you've actually got something in the events and you can change the name of the event. Read events, write events. Read events goes away because it's a new node. It says it hasn't got any events, so there's nothing to display. So what we want to do is we want to define a servo, well, how a servo moves using this module. So we double click on the node itself, and that will give us these little sliders here: default speeds, positions, and you can test that these options over here, depending on what happens when power's on and off, and what happens when you've got more than one servo configured, because you can actually configure to one event all 8 servos to move if you so wanted to. So what do you do first of all? Right, you set the positions using these 2 sliders. Those 2 sliders will cause the arm of the servo to move. You can then test those by clicking the 2 buttons, and you'll be able to see the servo move. The speeds default is 0. If you click those values, then they will alter the speed at which the servo moves, obviously. The higher the value, the slower the speed the servo is moving at. Okay. Over here, we have servo startup position. So normally, when you start Cameo Servo, it moves to the position it was in when it was turned off. You can set it to do nothing, or you can set it to move to the off position, depending on what you've set here. And that depends on what your servo is connected to. These 2 little tick boxes, 1 second cut off. What that does is 1 second after it has reached the end of travel, be it either in this case 0 or 255, it will cut the power to the servo. Not the physical power, but the signal power. That is there to stop the signal trying to move all the time. If you uncheck that box, it will continue to send the position signal ad infinitum until you power down the network. Servo moves sequentially. That is, if you have multiple servos commanded by the same trigger event, you can quite happily just say, right, do that one and do that one. You don't have that selected, then what will happen is that they'll both move together. Okay, so what do? We click finish. Okay. Now we need to teach in this event. So I'm just going to clear these messages in both boxes. And you'll see when I press button 1 on the CAN imp, I'm getting this message up here. Now what I want it to do is 1 press, be on, and a 2nd press, be off. So I have to go into the CAN imp, double click on the node and say that input 1 is a PB push button toggle mode. Press OK. Writes those events. So now when I press it, first time I press it, it turns on. Second time I press it, it turns off. What do I do now? Right. You highlight in the lower CAN imp window event 1. And you then left click on it and drag it up and drop it onto the Canmio servo entry in the nodes window. That gives you an option then as to what you want that event to do. So we have set output to the on position, set output to the off position, do nothing. The default for all of these channels is do nothing, obviously. If you want it to report a start of day, you tick that box and then you press OK and you don't have anything in there. What we want to do is we want it to move to the on position. So you highlight that because it's on channel 1. You press OK. All right, so when we now press, just clear these messages again, button, the servo moves to the on position. We press it again, the servo moves across to the off position. Press it again, and it goes back to the on position. Now, say we've got that connected to a set of points, and we want to change the flow polarity at the midpoint. How do we do that? Right, what we do is we create an event. I've already done it here. What I'll do, I'll delete it by using Alt-D, because it's highlighted. And then we'll say, do you want to delete this short event? Yes, that gets rid of it. Deleting any event from here will also delete it from any module you have taught it to. So how do we recreate that? We go to events and learn. That gives us a short events list. Events list would be the name we're going to give it is servo feedback event. And we give it a number. Now, you can choose any number that's not been used. It's up to you. I'm going to use 100. That's okay. There we go. The event is back. Right. So if I now drag that one onto the Cameo servo and drop there, we'll see that there's two tabs at the top here, consumed events and produced events. We want produced events to tab. Server 1, select, and it's okay. So that's wrote those different values. So now, when I press the button, you see that, and then you see an event being produced, and it's got to the other end. I press it, the servo to move the other way. As the servo passes its midpoint, it provides the feedback event. So you've got an off event going one way and an on event from the other way. So what are we going to use that event for? Well, we haven't got any relays, but what I have got on here is the can out, which has on it a little test board with LEDs on. And what we're going to get you to do is switch the LED on as a pulse. Sorry, no, we're going to switch it on and off as it passes the midpoint. So here it goes. First thing you do, double click can out, and you decide which channel you want to use. Which channel are we going to use? We're going to use output 1. Now we can either have it continuous, single pulse, or repeat pulses. Pulse timing is set here, and the startup action here again, when it powers the module up, is either off, none, or saved. Okay. That is output 1 to 4. This is outputs 5 to 8. That's okay. Next thing we do is we drag the event that is now in the Cameo servo, and you drop it onto the can out. You will then see that you get a box with all 8 channels in. Consumed events, this is one we want to turn the LED on and off. Produced events can produce an event when a channel switches. Same as with the servo, except it's just on off and there is no midpoint. Okay. So we want to turn output 1 on. Okay. So click OK. So what we have now is a series of modules that are all interlinked. So if I press button on the camp, servo will move. Event is produced, which was the off event. Move it back the other way, and the LED lights. That indicates that that on-off event is being dealt with. Okay. Right. So we're just going to stop sharing the screen, and then you can see it working properly. So down, focus. This is the servo here. This bottom board down here is the input board, and this one here is the output board. When I press the switch, you see the servo arm moves, and you can also see up here that the LED is lit. When I press the input switch again, as it passes midpoint, you can see the LED go off. Again, goes on again. Okay, that's it for today. Okay, guys, thanks very much.